Hello, everyone, and welcome to Exploring Consciousness. This is our fourth weekly meditation, and today I will be sharing with you a method from the Tantric tradition in transforming our experience of pleasure into the recognition of awareness. So before we start, if you haven't already, I want you to pause this video and get something delicious to eat. So that could be a fruit, cake, or chocolate, or candy, or whatever you like. So pick something you like to eat and bring it back, and then continue with this meditation. So I want to share with you a transformation technique of how we can take the energy and the experience, the sensation of pleasure, specifically the pleasure of eating today, but this method can be used on any kind of pleasure really, and how we can transform that energy so that it helps us to go deeply into ourselves. How we can shift that energy towards awareness and use that to deepen our rest and our recognition of it. How we can use our experience of pleasure to inquire into the nature of our mind. So, I would like to say before we begin that pleasure is not the point in this meditation. So the more pleasure, the better, but feeling the pleasure, experiencing the pleasure, and having more pleasure in this case is not the point. It's using that pleasure to have a moment of awakening. So that's the point. And I would like to begin by reading you a quote from Lama Thupten Yeshe, one of my favorite lamas, from his book, The Introduction to Tantra, The Transformation of Desire. If you haven't read that book yet and you're interested in tantric meditation, I would really recommend you to read it. So he says, the function of Tantra is to transform all pleasures into the transcendental experience of deep penetrative awareness. So that's what I want to try to introduce you to today, how we can play around with that and how we actually make that shift. And I want to do it in a light way, so we can just play around with it in our own way and see what happens. So please don't view this meditation as a form of tantric initiation or something. We're just playing around with this method. Usually, pleasure and the pursuit of pleasure is regarded as an obstacle in spiritual practice. And this is true for basically all spiritual traditions. And the reason that is because the way we usually go about our pursuit of pleasure is in a very contracted sense, where we desire that object and we can do negative or harmful actions to acquire that object which we desire. And so our pursuit of pleasure is usually from a very egoistical standpoint, where we want pleasure for ourselves. But using this method of transformation, we can actually use pleasure to speed up our awakening process. And if we do that with an altruistic intention of doing it for the benefit of all beings, then it really becomes a powerful way for us to shift our identity from our contracted sense of self and the worries and problems of our poor little me into a deep recognition of who we really are. And that's the point of all of this. So before we begin, let me share with you the 3 faults of pleasure. It's small contemplation in the Buddhist tradition. So all pleasure has 3 faults. It's temporary, it's addictive, and it's not nourishing. So meaning, no matter what kind of pleasure you get, so all kinds of pleasure is temporary, it fades, it doesn't last forever. And because of that, pleasure cannot really give us what we long for, which is lasting fulfillment, a sense of deep satisfaction. And they're addictive. So as soon as we get pleasure and we enjoy that, then our mind always goes to, I want more. And like drinking water with salt, our thirst is never quenched. So we continue pursuing that pleasurable object, and we actually gain less and less pleasure from it because our mind becomes used to it. So that's the dilemma we're in, especially in the modern age, where we're seeking pleasure in a hedonistic way, meaning we see that as the meaning of our life, to gain as much pleasure as possible, and we confuse pleasure with happiness. And that's the reason, or one of the reasons, why the world is in such a state it is in today. So if we could use pleasure in a skillful way so that it actually brings us closer to awakening, not further from, now that's a very interesting viewpoint, I think, especially from the way we live in the West, because we have access to so much pleasure. It's part of our everyday, where we have delicious food to eat, where we have wonderful activities, we enjoy listening to music every day, and so on. So we're really surrounded by pleasure. And if we could use that pleasure to awaken, then that would be wonderful. So let's see if we can do it. If we can transform an experience of pleasure together. I want you to prepare your object of pleasure so you have it easily accessible. I brought an apple with me today, so maybe not a major thing, but it's enough to do this meditation. And as always, let's begin by settling down and paying attention to the present moment. A good way to do that is to softly slide from being in the head, being occupied with the stories and thoughts, memories and judgments and everything else that's going on, to paying attention to the body, to noticing how it feels. The different sensations that are moving around in the body. Noticing the places where you feel a bit contracted. and the places that feel open and light. If you feel it is supportive for you, then you could do a quick body scan, moving awareness from your toes up to the top of your head. And do it in your own way, do it in your own pace. So just sliding into the present moment. By noticing what is. Without trying to change it. Just befriending it. Okay, that's great. So hopefully we're a bit more centered now in the present moment. And so I would like to invite you to take your object of pleasure and begin by just observing it, looking at it. You could use your nose and smell it if you like. So just observing the object. So really think, oh, this is so great. I'm going to eat it and it's going to taste wonderfully. And I'm so grateful to have this object to enjoy. And so I will invite you to take your first bite. And when you take that bite, I want you to really explore the sensation, to really go into the flavor, to feel how it moves around in your mouth when it touches your tongue, to notice the consistency, the texture, the hardness, to really just focus all your attention on the sensation of eating it. So nothing else, so nothing complicated. Just enjoy the flavor. So this is like eating mindfully. Mindful eating, just paying attention to how it feels. And the next step I would like to invite you take your next bite is to, besides being aware of the sensation of eating, also shift your attention to who is the one who's eating this apple. So search with your mind for the person who is enjoying that flavor, who is having that experience. So look like you would go into a dark room with a flashlight and scan the entire room, the room being your body and your mind, for this eye. So where is this I who enjoys this food? So looking for our I. So you're welcome to take the next bite. So when you do this step, you can really try to follow the taste and the flavor. Where does it go? So where does that experience arise and dissolve? And hopefully, you might notice when you do this meditation that you can't really find anything. You can't find the person that's enjoying the object. You can't find the I that has the experience. So that's the point of this second step, to have a taste of the not findability of ourself. So the third step I would like to invite you to do is, when you take your last bite, I want you to surrender yourself to the experience. To really, as best as you can, to allow your sense of self to dissolve into the experience and let everything else just fade away. So really immerse yourself in the experience, so that nothing else matters except that. So try to the best of your ability. So I invite you to take your last bite in this meditation. So can you notice that when you do that, when you try to relax into the experience of pleasure without finding yourself and just dissolving into the experience, there is a part of you, or there is an aspect of your experience which never changes, which remains the same regardless of what step you do in this meditation. And that's the same part of you which has never changed since you were a young child, and who you've been your entire life. So that unchanging sense of awareness, recognition of that, is the point of this practice. And that's the point of these steps also. So the first step was the mindfulness step of being aware of the present moment and the sensations. The second step was what's called in Buddhism recognizing emptiness, that you can't really find a separate solid self anywhere. And the third step was the dissolution, the letting go and the surrender into what is. So I invite you to play with this method and whatever you do, and maybe you can try using objects that are not just related to taste, but music as well. The hearing, you could experiment with touch and see how that affects you. The point is the transformation of the energy into the recognition of awareness. And it's just a simple shift of focusing your attention back into the source of your conscious experience. Yes, so I would like to read to you the rest of the quote from Lama. So I read, the function of Tantra is to transform all pleasures into the transcendental experience of deep penetrative awareness. Instead of advocating separation from worldly pleasures the way many other traditions do, Tantra emphasizes that it is much more effective for human beings to enjoy themselves and to channel the energy of their enjoyments into a quick and powerful path to fulfillment and enlightenment. This is the most skillful way of using our precious human potential. Then I will skip a part, just so we're finished a bit quicker. Contrary to what some people might believe, there is nothing wrong with having pleasures and enjoyments. What is wrong is the confused way we grasp onto these pleasures, turning them from a source of happiness into a source of pain and dissatisfaction. It is such grasping and attachment that is the problem, not the pleasures themselves. Therefore, if we could free ourselves from this habitual grasping, we could enjoy ourselves as much as we want without any of the difficulties that usually accompany our ordinary compulsive search for pleasure. So what Lama means here with grasping is the grasping onto the sense of I, the I who's experiencing pleasure, and the I who's tasting object, the I who's hearing music, the I who's feeling the touch. So really searching for this I and not finding it is a key to the transformation of the energy. So let me see what I had more. Yeah. And a mudra I would like to show you, which I feel resonate with making this shift, is as this. This is the mudra. So you're experiencing the pleasure, you're feeling it in your body, and then you switch. You shift it back into awareness, and then you view reality from that position, from the position of awareness itself. So that's what this symbolizes. So you feel pleasure, whatever pleasure from whatever senses, and you shift. And the reason this method can be so powerful is because our mind is naturally drawn to pleasure. We crave pleasure, which we can clearly see in the way we live our lives, but we're hardwired to seek pleasurable experiences. So instead of letting that search be the cause of all our problems, we can actually, using this method, transform it so that it actually becomes like a jet fuel for our training in recognizing awareness. So this method was usually regarded as secret and still is, but because of the modern age, this technique is now freely available to everyone on the internet. It's just a Google search away. So that's why I felt confident in sharing this technique with you. So I invite you to play around with this in your everyday life and to see how it affects your ordinary experience. That's it for today. So now we can share, we can discuss, and for all you watching at home, I wish you a great day. Goodbye.